Welcome to the bedtime sleepy historian, the place where history tiptoes into your dreams. Here, we explore the quiet, dim-lit corners of the past. The jobs, the rituals, the people who rarely made it into the grand tales, but whose lives still echo in stone corridors and moonlit streets. Tonight's journey takes us into the shadow of the castle walls, where a man worked only when the world was asleep. They called him the Nightman. He knew every creak of the drawbridge, every shift in the wind through the arrow slits, and every secret the darkness carried. But there was one rule everyone obeyed. You never looked the Nightman in the eye. The shadow between the torches. The day belonged to the guards in their bright livery, to the servants clattering along the kitchens, to the messengers with dust on their boots and haste in their eyes. But the night belonged to one man. When the last torch sputtered in the outer yard, and the watchmen on the wall took their posts in twos, the Nightman began his slow, solitary patrol. His steps were unhurried, but his eyes, always hidden beneath the hood of his cloak, missed nothing. Nobody quite knew how he got the job. Some said he had once been a monk, cast out for reasons whispered but never named. Others swore he had served as a soldier in a foreign war, and had seen things that kept him from sleeping. Whatever the truth, the Nightman moved through the castle, as though the shadows themselves bent around him. It was his duty to see what others should not see. The quiet trysts in the stables, the hand that slipped a note under a door, the rat that darted toward the pantry with a crumb in its mouth. Yet he never spoke of what he saw. Never. Which is why the rule existed. If you happened upon the Nightman, you kept your head down. You walked past. You let his hooded figure vanish into the dark, as though you had only imagined him. Because the moment you looked into his eyes, you might learn something about yourself you were not ready to know. The eyes you never met twice. The first warning about the Nightman was always given in the same tone. Not loud enough to carry, but just sharp enough to be remembered. Don't look at him. Not once, not ever. Some newcomers thought it was superstition, a bit of castle folklore to keep the green lads on edge during their first week. Until, of course, one of them broke the rule. It was a scullery boy one winter. A thin, pale child with a habit of staring too long at people's faces. He had been carrying a bucket of peelings to the pig yard. When the Nightman passed along the north wall, the boy didn't step aside. He didn't look at the ground. He looked straight into the hood. Witnesses swore they saw the Nightman pause for just a heartbeat. Not to speak. Not to scold. Just to let the boy see. By morning, the boy was gone. Not dead, not ill. Just different. He still worked in the kitchens, but he no longer laughed. He didn't hum when he scrubbed the pots. And if you asked him what was wrong, he only shook his head as though afraid the words might follow him out. The cook said he had the look, now, and everyone knew what she meant. No one got the look twice. Once was enough. The work no one else would do. Every castle had jobs nobody wanted. Shoveling the stables, cleaning the garderobe pits, hauling firewood and sleet. But the Nightman's work was worse. Not for the body, but for the mind. It was said he walked the corridors between midnight and the morning bell, patrolling the walls, cellars, and the black corners beneath the great hall. Not for thieves. Not for spies. Those belonged to the guards. The Nightman hunted other things. Things that did not belong in the keep, but sometimes found their way in all the same. An open window where no wind should be. Footsteps in the solar when every noble was asleep in their chambers. A whisper from the chapel when the altar candles had burned to stubs. He dealt with them. Quietly. Permanently. No one saw him work. But sometimes in the morning the stone floors bore faint scratch marks. Or there was a dampness in the air that hadn't been there before. And every so often, a door would be nailed shut overnight. Its key melted down into nothing but a lump of metal. The steward never explained. The nightman never spoke. And the servants learned not to ask. Payment in things that were not gold. The nightman did not draw a wage in the usual sense. No pouch of silver pennies. No tally in the steward's accounts. His payment came in other forms. Once a month, on the dark of the moon, the cook would leave a bowl of warm goat's milk on the stair leading to the old tower. Next to it, a square of black bread, and a small bundle wrapped in wool. The bundle was never opened in public. But those who'd spied on the delivery swore it was never the same twice. Once, a cluster of dried rowan berries. Another time, a strip of parchment with writing so faded it could barely be read. Once, disturbingly, nothing but a single, long, white hair, coiled like a question mark. The nightman took these offerings without a word, slipping back into the unlit places as though he'd never been there at all. It was whispered that he didn't spend what he was given. He used it. For his work. Because the things that moved at night inside the keep couldn't be held back by iron or spears. They needed stranger coin. Rules for those who saw him. The castle had no written laws about the nightman. But everyone knew the rules. They were passed down in kitchen whispers, muttered between stable hands, slipped into bedtime warnings for children who wandered after dark. Rule 1. If you see him first, close your eyes. Keep them shut until the sound of his boots fades. Do not count the steps. Counting draws his attention. Rule 2. If he speaks to you, answer in no more than 3 words. Anything longer, and you might find yourself answering a question you never heard. Rule 3. Never follow him. Even if he drops something, even if it's yours. Especially if it's yours. Rule 4. If you hear humming, walk the other way. He was never known to hum. So if you hear it, it means he's not alone. Some claimed these rules were superstition, born of servants who liked to keep newcomers nervous. But others swore they'd seen the price of breaking them. A boy who came back with hair turned white at 14. A scullery maid who forgot her own name. A soldier who tried to speak of what he'd seen and lost his tongue mid-sentence. The steward never confirmed these tales. But the next day, the nightman's goat's milk was always a little warmer. The route that never changed. Every night, the nightman's path was the same. It began in the stables, where the air was thick with hay dust and the slow breath of sleeping horses. From there, he would pass the laundry room, where damp linen hung like pale ghosts on lines, and down the north corridor, where the torches always burned lower than anywhere else. He would circle the outer wall once, as if counting each stone with his eyes, then vanish into the narrow stairs behind the chapel. A place no one used except him. It didn't matter if the castle was under siege, or the lord's household was in mourning, or the weather turned so foul that even the guards hid indoors. His route did not change. The cook said it was because his task was older than the lord who owned the castle. The blacksmith claimed the stones themselves would shift if the nightman took a different turn, closing the way behind him forever. But the laundress told the story in a softer way. Once, many years ago, the nightman's route had been broken. Not by him, by accident. A noble's hunting hound had bolted into his path. The nightman had paused, stepped around it, and continued as if nothing happened. By morning, the east tower was gone. Not crumbled. Not destroyed. Gone. as if it had never been built. And in its place, the grass grew short and neat, like it had been there 100 years. The ones who tried to watch. It was a favorite dare among the castle's younger squires. To follow the Nightman, start to finish, without being seen. They never made it past the first turn. The first attempt was by a boy named Raffin. Quick-footed, quiet as a stray cat. He swore he would keep a full 10 paces behind. But halfway down the north corridor, he vanished. Not died, not screamed, just gone. The guards said they heard a rustle like parchment, and then only the sound of the Nightman's boots. A year later, 2 brothers tried together. They planned it like a siege. One in front to, accidentally, slow him. The other behind to observe. Neither was seen again, though their boots were found neatly side by side in the chapel stair. After that, people stopped calling it a dare. They called it tempting the shadow. Still, a handful tried. A visiting monk with more curiosity than sense. A thief who thought the Nightman's pouch was full of gold. A maid who wanted to prove the rumors wrong. They all vanished. And in each case, something in the castle shifted. A window gone. A room door bricked over overnight. A stretch of wall where a corridor had been. By the time the last attempt was made, even the boldest grooms and most drunken guards knew to step aside when the Nightman passed. Not out of fear of him, but of what the castle would take in exchange. The things in his pouch. The Nightman's pouch was not leather, though it looked like it in the torchlight. It was something older. A hide with no name in any language the scribes dared to write. It never sagged, never emptied, never filled. Always the same size. Always tied with a cord that seemed to tighten itself when anyone stared too long. Those who glimpsed inside claimed to see different things. A cook once swore she saw folded maps, inked with roads that twisted away from the known world, and curled into black lakes. A scribe said he saw keys. Hundreds, thousands, none of them shaped for human locks. One night, drunk enough to boast, told of glimpsing a single candle flame, burning in a windless dark. It flickered, and he swore he heard someone on the other side of it, breathing. The pouch made no noise when the Nightman walked. Yet the air around it was never still. Candles bent toward it. Smoke curled in its direction, as though the whole castle recognized what it held. Some said the things inside weren't objects at all. They were pieces of time. Stolen moments from those who tried to follow him. A heartbeat from Raffin. A breath from the brothers. An unspoken prayer from the maid. And perhaps, if you stood in the dark long enough, you might hear them whisper, soft as dust on stone, begging to be returned. The circuit. The Nightman's walk began after the last bell, when the moon slipped low enough to touch the roof slates. He did not start at the gates or the courtyard. He began in the smallest, darkest place the castle had. A broom closet that hadn't held brooms for 100 years. From there, he moved like a draft of cold air, through corridors that bent in ways they shouldn't, down staircases with more steps than they had during the day. His route was not random, though no map could chart it. He paused in doorways, stood perfectly still in the kitchens, lingered at the edges of the chapel, where the saints in the stained glass seemed to avert their eyes. In the library, he would reach up, touching the top shelf where no book had been kept in living memory. Sometimes his glove came away with a single grain of salt. Other times, with a strand of hair too fine to belong to anyone still alive. He never carried a lantern, but his shadow always preceded him, long and trembling, as though it feared what was coming behind it. When he passed the guards, they didn't salute. They didn't move. It was said if you even blinked while he walked by, you might open your eyes in a hallway you didn't recognize. The last part of his circuit always ended the same way. At a narrow window in the highest turret. He would stand there, head tilted slightly, as though listening to something far beyond the hills. No one knew what he heard. But if you looked at his reflection in the glass, you might see another figure standing just behind him. And it would be smiling. The turret window. The turret room was so small that even in daylight it seemed carved from shadow. Its stones were older than the rest of the castle, mottled with lichen that somehow grew on the inside. The air there was always damp, and it smelled faintly of burned rosemary. The window itself was not much more than a slit, but the Nightman treated it as though it were the grandest arch in the palace. He approached without haste, his boots making no sound on the warped boards. Beyond the window lay the sleeping valley. By night, it was a dark quilt of fields and river silver, stitched together by the occasional glimmer of a watchman's torch. But the Nightman wasn't looking at the valley. His gaze always tilted upward, toward the sky that wasn't quite the same as the one everyone else saw. To him, the stars seemed closer, low enough to touch, bright enough to hum. He stood as still as the stone, listening. If you pressed your ear to the cold wall beside him, you might hear it too. A faint, uneven rhythm. It wasn't wind. It wasn't an owl's wing beat. It was more like a slow, deliberate knocking, as if something on the far side of the sky was asking to be let in. And once, just once, someone claimed they saw the Nightman answer. He lifted his hand, fingers splayed, and tapped the glass 3 times. By morning, the valley below was unchanged, but a child born that night was found to have no reflection at all. The oldest story. Long before the castle had a name, before its towers were dressed in banners and its halls in velvet, there was only the hill and the wind. The hill was a lonely one, steep and narrow at the top, so that even the goats avoided it. And the wind, the wind here was not like other wind. It carried voices, low and almost human, as if the air itself were gossiping about things it had seen in ages past. One winter, a wandering mason came to the hill. He was nameless in every version of the tale, though some swore his eyes were clouded with cataracts, and others swore they were black as pitch. He told the villagers he had been sent to seal the gap. When they asked what gap he meant, he only smiled in a way that made no one want to ask again. He built the turret first. Not the castle, not the walls, not the gatehouse. Just the turret, a narrow, crooked tower of pale stone that caught the moon like a blade. It had a single window, facing a part of the sky no one thought worth watching. When he was done, he walked up the winding steps, disappeared inside, and for 3 nights worked by lamplight. On the 4th morning, the lamplight was gone, and so was the mason. The villagers searched, but the only sign of him was a pair of worn boots sitting neatly at the turret's base, as if he had stepped out of them and vanished. From that night onward, the wind on the hill no longer carried voices. It carried silence. And every so often, if you climbed the hill after dark, you'd see a figure in the window. Not moving, not waving. Just keeping watch on whatever the turret had been built to face. Some said it was the mason. Others said it was what the mason had trapped there. Either way, they called it the Nightman. The visitor who knocked twice. The first written account of the Nightman came not from a court chronicler or a noble guest, but from a tanner's apprentice named Jaron. His handwriting was shaky, and the parchment was water-spotted in ways that suggested tears, though he insisted it was rain. Jaron claimed he had gone up the hill one summer night on a dare. The moon was a sharp white coin in the sky, and the grass smelled dry and sun-baked. His friends had bet him 2 copper pieces to go right up to the turret's door and knock, not once, not thrice, but exactly twice. 2 knocks and then wait. He did as told. 2 dull thuds against the pale stone doorframe. At first, nothing. Then a sound. Not footsteps, not breathing. But a slow turning of something heavy, like the winding of a millstone. The narrow window above went dark, as if something had stepped in front of the light. Jaren felt the grass under him stiffen, each blade frozen with dew that had not been there a moment before. When the door opened, it did so without sound. He saw no face. Only the outline of a tall figure, its edges oddly blurred, as if the air around it were heat shimmer. It did not speak. Instead, it held out an arm, pale, long, jointed wrong, and opened its hand. Inside lay a small key of black iron, no bigger than a thumb. Jaren refused to touch it. The figure closed its hand, stepped backward, and the door swung shut on its own. When he looked up again, the window glowed once more with lamplight. Jaren ran home. The next morning, he found the black key lying on his workbench. He burned it in the tannery's furnace, but swore that for weeks after, he could hear 2 faint knocks on his window each night before sleep. The Queen's Debt. The tale was never recorded in the official court histories, but a fragment survives in a nursemaid's lullaby, passed through 3 generations before it found its way to a scribe's ear. It speaks of a young queen, no more than 17, whose first months on the throne were marked by sleeplessness. She would rise from her bed, pacing the marble floors until the candle wax had pooled and hardened in shapeless puddles. Her ladies-in-waiting whispered that her dreams were troubled, but the truth was stranger. Each night, just before dawn, she claimed to hear a voice, low, steady, without accent, speaking from the darkness beyond her bed curtains. It always said the same thing. "You still owe me." When asked who, she would not say. Only once did she confide in her most trusted handmaiden, who later swore, under confession, that the queen had made a bargain years before, when she was still a child in the country estate. She had wandered into the woods and found herself hopelessly lost. A figure had emerged from the shadows, not a huntsman, not a monk, and asked her what she wished most. The girl had answered without hesitation, "To be queen." The figure, she said, had laughed, not cruelly, but knowingly, and promised it could be done. But all debts must be paid. The queen's reign began the following spring, after a sudden fever claimed her cousin, the heir apparent. The old king died the next winter. And so the crown found her. Now, as queen, she had everything she thought she wanted, except peace. For 3 nights in her 3rd year, the voice was joined by a sound she could not mistake. 2 knocks, slow and deliberate, against the bedchamber door. When she ordered it opened, nothing waited beyond. On the 4th night, she did not open it at all. And from that night onward she never spoke of the dead again. But she was seen more often in the turret's shadowed halls, her hand resting on the stone as if listening for something inside. No one truly knew when the Nightman's final night would come. There was no ceremony, no retirement feast, no golden cup to mark the end of years in shadow. Often, the job ended abruptly, sometimes with a quiet disappearance, sometimes with a whispered tale of illness that was never fully explained. For Garrick, the Nightman who had served the castle for 37 winters, the end came on a night when the moon looked like a thin shard of ice. His steps, usually as steady as the turning of the clock, slowed as he reached the north wall. He leaned on the stone for a moment longer than usual, staring at the dark forest beyond. He thought of the countless nights he had walked these paths, unseen by all but the cats that slinked along the gutters. He thought of the secrets he'd carried, the quarrels he had overheard, the whispered alliances, the desperate cries in the night. Secrets that would die with him, because that was the oath. By dawn, he was gone, No one found his body. The next night, a new Nightman walked the walls, silent and watchful. Garrick's name was not spoken aloud again. But the cats still paused sometimes, staring at empty spaces in the dark, spaces where, perhaps, the shadow of the old Nightman still walked. The cats of the castle had never been mere animals. They were watchers, too, creatures who moved between the visible and the unseen. They knew which stones were warm in winter, which windows were worth staring into, and which footsteps meant danger. After Garrick vanished, the cats began to gather in places they hadn't lingered before. At first, it was the parapet above the north wall, where the old Nightman used to pause. Then the archway near the kitchens, where a single oil lamp always flickered lower than the rest. The servants whispered that the cats were keeping vigil. Some swore they heard low, rumbling purrs in the empty guardroom, as though they were comforting someone no longer visible. One cook swore she saw a black cat sitting alone in the courtyard one night, tail curled neatly, staring at the gate as if expecting a figure in a dark cloak to return. She didn't call out. In the castle, certain silences were better left unbroken. By spring, the cats resumed their usual wanderings. But anyone who knew how to watch closely would notice, on some nights, one or two still lingered on the north wall, waiting for a step that would never come. The letter in the ember. On a winter night thick with smoke from the great hall's hearth, a servant sweeping the ashes found something strange, a scrap of parchment, curled and browned at the edges, but not entirely burned. The ink had blurred, but not enough to hide the strange looped handwriting. No name was signed, only the words. The true key is not kept, but carried. Ask no more, for they are listening. The steward, pale, took it at once to the chamberlain. But by morning the parchment was gone. Some said it was locked away in the castle's archive, others whispered it had been tossed back into the fire, this time, to burn fully. Those who caught a glimpse before it vanished swore they saw a faint watermark, a crown, pierced by a single arrow. No one could say what it meant, but after that night, guards began checking even the ashes in the braziers before emptying them. As though they feared the fires themselves might carry messages no one was meant to see. The letter in the ember. On a winter night thick with smoke from the great hall's hearth, a servant sweeping the ashes found something strange, a scrap of parchment, curled and browned at the edges, but not entirely burned. The ink had blurred, but not enough to hide the strange looped handwriting. No name was signed, only the words. The true key is not kept, but carried. Ask no more, for they are listening. The steward, pale, took it at once to the chamberlain. But by morning the parchment was gone. Some said it was locked away in the castle's archive, others whispered it had been tossed back into the fire, this time, to burn fully. Those who caught a glimpse before it vanished swore they saw a faint watermark, a crown, pierced by a single arrow. No one could say what it meant, but after that night, guards began checking even the ashes in the braziers before emptying them. As though they feared the fires themselves might carry messages no one was meant to see. The Feast of the Uninvited. It was supposed to be a celebration, harvest's end, winter's first snow, but someone noticed, too late, that a stranger sat at the high table. No one had seen him enter, yet he raised his cup with the familiarity of an old friend. His cloak was of deep green wool, fine enough for a baron, though no one knew his crest. He ate sparingly, drank deeply, and laughed at the king's jests as though he had known them all his life. When the musicians played, he rose, bowing low to the queen before vanishing into the crowd. Servants searched the hall, but there was no sign, not even a muddy footprint. That night, the kitchens found an empty goblet placed neatly upon the shelf where the royal cups were kept. Inside it, carved so faintly it was only visible in candlelight, was the same crown and arrow seen on the parchment in the hearth. When the torches went out. In the end, the castle kept its secrets the way winter keeps its frost, quietly, patiently, without asking permission. The Nightman's rounds continued, his lantern swinging like a small, private moon through the stone corridors. He passed locked doors and whispered arguments, shadows of feasts long gone, and the soft breathing of guards pretending to be more awake than they were. Some nights he would pause by the outer wall, looking not at the village below, but at the stars, his face unreadable, the same as it had been for decades. When his shift ended, he left no mark behind. No one could say where he slept, or if he ever truly did. By day, he was a ghost of memory, spoken of in lowered voices, named only in hints. Years later, when new walls rose and old ones crumbled, the Nightman was gone. But in certain winters, when the wind carried the right pitch through the halls, servants swore they heard the faint, rhythmic tap of his boots, and the creak of a lantern's handle. And if you followed the sound, it would always lead you to a darkened corridor where no torches burned. Only a faint glimmer, moving away, just far enough ahead that you could never quite see the man carrying it.